The first thing that Rebbe told us is that this is Deir HaShvi. And Kol HaShvi in Chavivin, you have to bring the Shechina down Lamata. L'cheira, what is the special quality of the Shvi? The process begins with the Rishon. Avram Avinu brought the Shechina down from Rekiya Zayin to Rekiya Vav. By the time you get already to Rekiya HaBeis, what's already the big Chiddush? It's 6 steps out of 7 are already done. Okay, so one more step. Okay, Hakol Hilach Achar Achitum. But what Taki is special about the 7? So there was one time the Rebbe said that the Shvi is Chavivin like Shabbos legabe Chol. So the Deir HaShvi, our Deir, is like Shabbos legabe Chol. People walked out of that Farbrengen stunned. I know that there are people who stopped coming to Farbrengens. To say that the Alter Rebbe is Chol legabe, they couldn't handle it. I was sitting in Zal, and it was like a Tuesday, I think, and Mendel Morozov came into the Zal, middle of the day, Shike, from Shabbos. Shabbos legabe Chol? He couldn't. So really, the Shvi is radically different. Not just the last step. It's a completely different Shabbos legabe Chol. How different is Shabbos from Chol? A minute before Shabbos, if you light the Shabbos candle, it is a big mitzvah. A minute later, that mitzvah is a sin. So it's a radical change. What was a mitzvah can now become negative. So we really have to appreciate what is this. So if we take a look, what is the message of Chassidus, and what did the message produce? If you had to sum up, what did the Alter Rebbe, what did he want, what did he say, and what did he produce? And the main question is, what did it produce? If you have to sum it up, the Alter Rebbe differed from all the other Talmidei HaMagid because the Alter Rebbe insisted on Pnimis, not on Makifim. That the inspiration, the Yirah Shamayim, the Avedas Hashem has to come from inside, not from outside. This was an intense battle because the other Talmidei HaMagid was so against it. He was alone. And he insisted that this is Derech HaBaal Shem Tov. And they insisted beferish not. So every Maimer, all of Tanya, if it's the Alter Rebbe, it has only one message. And the message is, not Makifim, Pnimi. Although Makif is higher and Makif is stronger, but the emes is in the Pnimi. Since Chassidus creates Chassidim, that message created a new type of person. a person who is truly apnimi. So the Alter Rebbe's Chassidim could laugh at Gili Eliyahu. They could laugh at Mufsim. They became truly amazing, deep human beings that probably was not seen before. Rabbi Yomin Kletzker said, pan to pan, right? He wanted to teach him all the secrets and the whole impressive, awesome. So what is the Taich Pnimi? So a lot has been said about this. It's nicht komposhet. By the way, the same theme lasted for 3 generations. The Mittler Rebbe and the Tzemach Tzedek, it was all on the same theme. Makif is higher, Makif is starker, but Medaf haben Pnimis. And for this, there was Mesiras Nefesh. So what is a Pnimi? A Pnimi means what excites you should come from inside, not from outside. What excites you on the inside? What? Seichel. Havana. If you really understand something, you get excited. Until you understand it, the excitement is coming from outside. Even if the excitement is coming from outside, meaning from the makifim of your neshama. So Rabbi Kusil Lepler got a brocha, a meifes from the Rebbe, and his Yetzer Hara disappeared. Which means that by him, Chaya and Yechida were a constant influence. The result was that the Mittler Rebbe wrote Imrei Bina for him, because he was the only one who understood it. So, Chassidim used to say that all of a sudden he would become inspired, Vikusil, from Onchappen, and he had to dance. So he would grab whoever was near and force him to dance with him. Chassidim used to tell their children, Rabbi Kusil is not a dugma. You can't use him as a model. Why? Because that's a milmayla. It's not the process of Ibn Mela. That was Chabad. Chabad means your inspiration should come from within, from your. So the Alter Rebbe would say, we hear always the quote, "Ich will nicht dein Gan Eden, ich will nur dir allein." But there was another quote that is attributed to the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe said, Ato harei solodas. Ato, du Eibishter. Atzmus ein Seif. Hereisa osich bavisen, lo das am soll dich kennen. Talking to a group of yeshiva boys, and I asked them, there's a mitzvah of Yedias Hashem, what do you know about the Eibishter? Tell me something. What do you know about the Eibishter? Their answer was, Les machshava tvisabei. It was a little upsetting because, back in those days, I paid $12,000 to send my kid to yeshiva, and he comes back with less machshava tvisabei. That's $12,000 worth. So what happened to the mitzvah of Yedias Hashem? Huh?
If we truly know less machshava tvisabei,
Shana madrege.
it's worth it.
It's worth $12,000.
What did you want to say? Lights us on $1 million.
Farbrengen und Lernen, my morim, and the sof is less machshava tvisabei. I could have told you that before you went to yeshiva. And thank you. So what's the mitzvah of Yedias Hashem? Tachlis yediyah shalei neida. Okay, I could have told you that. What does that mean even? So you learn all your life, and the tachlis is you don't know. That's not what it means. There's a mitzvah of yediyas Hashem. Pchatchefegin once said that in Siddur it says that before Kiddush HaChedesh, Nochen Leida Zman HaMelad. So it says Nochen Leida. And people run, they look on the calendar, they have to know exactly when is the Melad. There's a mitzvah deraisa, Leida. The Eibishter, keine läuft nicht. So the Alter Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe, and the Tzemach Tzedek, the theme, the point, the nakuda, the tachlis was pnimis, not makif. Ver nispol, from what you know, not from what you don't know. Yeah, a good example of a pnimis dikerid. There was a place, I don't remember where, in Russia, and Aid surprisingly decided to keep his store open on Shabbos. And there was a big tumult about it, and the man was stubborn. He's keeping his store open on Shabbos. So one time by a Farbrengen, the Pchatcher was Farbrengen, and he said that every time he walks by that store, he has a stab in his heart. And he said, no. Not because of the storekeeper. The storekeeper came on Nishgelen, never went to yeshiva, doesn't know what Shabbos means, doesn't know what Kedusha means. Not he is the Mechalel Shabbos. I do know what Shabbos is. And I spent all the years learning. And I understand what it is. And I'm not keeping Shabbos properly. That's what... So instead of being moved by what was wrong with the other guy, he took it personal, the pnimis, and he examined himself and said, where's my Shabbos? By the end of the 3 generations, Hasidim were awesome people. There was a Yiddishist, a writer, for the Tag Morgen Journal, and maybe for the Forwards, way back. He was invited to Farbrengen on Shabbos, spent Shabbos in Crown Heights. And he was a communist, a socialist, a atheist. He wrote his article the next week, and he says, I went to Crown Heights, I spent Shabbos, and I learned that there's a difference between Zeyer Frum and Tief Frum. He was impressed. This was not the Yiddishkeit that he had seen growing up. In some way, that was bringing the Shechina down to earth. Make a dira b'tachtonim, if a human being can internalize Getlichkeit, that's a dira b'tachtonim. And the Maimorim all say this. There's nothing lower than a human being's limited mind, and if you can bring a lacuse into a human mind, or the word that the Rebbe is Machaya Mesin, because there's nothing so dead like the human mind, and the Rebbe brings it alive. The next 3 generations, the Rebbe Marash and the Rebbe Rashab and the Friedrich Rebbe, there was a little bit of a shift in the nakuda of what is Chassidus. If I'm not mistaken, that little change cost the Rebbe Marash many Chassidim. They didn't adjust. What was the Rebbe Marash's message? Not the difference between Pnimis and Makiv, the difference between Giluyim and etzem. You take a look at all the Maimorim, if it's a big statement, but it's a little true. All the Maimorim, beginning with the Rebbe Rash, and certainly the Rebbe Rashab, the entire nakuda of every Maimer is the same thing. Sifranan an Iker, an etzem, and the etzem is much more important than the Giluyim. Hagam, the Giluyim are more Geschmack, whatever, but the etzem, that's it. L'mashal, what is the Giluyim and what is etzem? Mitzvahs that are mishpotin are Giluyim. But also the chukim, that's etzem. So the Aveda was to find in everything the etzem rather than the Giluyim. I'm talking to people in Borough Park and Williamsburg. They're very, very impressed. They're out of their, they're very nispol of the whole story, the whole saga with Rebashkin in jail. Like that kid said, who was in jail with Yosef? The Sadha Rebashkin. And they attribute it to his emunah. What kind of emunah? Such an incredible emunah. And he feeds it. Aleph Beis Gimel, emunah. Everybody has emunah. What he did was not a result of emunah. And he actually said it once himself. Masiach Lefitumei. He said, Mitzad emunah, I would have given myself a heter for almost everything. Was heißt emunah? You believe that the Eibishter knows what's going on, and that the Eibishter is present, and that he understands, and that and that he said that Eines Rahmana Patre, I am an Eines Onus, and therefore can make all sein and dem, can make all sein, and the Eibishter will understand. Das ist meine emunah. So mitzad emunah, you can work it out. What he was doing didn't come from his emunah. It came from the fact that there's an etzem, and etzem is not negotiable. Nicht is nicht. I'm sure you know all the stories. When they put him in jail before he came to prison, they took away his clothes, gave him jail clothes, and told him to come to the office or to whatever. He said, I need my tzitzis. I don't walk without talus cotton. They said, you're refusing to obey an order? He said, I'm not refusing. Bring a wheelchair, you can take me. But I don't walk without a talus cotton. They pushed, beat him up, and dragged him physically. He didn't walk. That comes from emunah. That comes from the message or the conviction. Nicht is nicht. It also comes from the conviction that if you make a little compromise, you're going to lose the war. Which is also part of that thinking that etzem can't be adjusted. 3 generations of that message, that the ikir is the etzem, the giluyim are... what kind of chassid did that create? It created people who every mitzvah and every word in Torah was mesiras nefesh. Because if there's no wiggle room, then that's mesiras nefesh. Eventually, of course, in the times of the Frierdiker Rebbe, the mesiras nefesh became physical. But even before that, the whole approach, the whole Yiddishkeit was mesiras nefesh. Because that's what etzem means. That there's no compromise, there's no wiggle room, there's no... So then the word was azay und nicht anders. Now we come to the Deir HaShvi. What is the Rebbe's message?
Could you just explain, why is that a big change from the Rebbe Marash to the previous three? That is Gilut, Pnimi, and Makiv to etzem and Gilut.
You can almost say that they're opposites. Mitzat Pnimis, if you're not up to it, if you don't have that conviction, don't do it. Don't fake it. Mitzad etzem, what do you mean you're not ready? Azay idos. Remember there was a guy came from Russia. I forget his name. He was a roofer. He was a worker. I don't know all the details. All I know is that he would come every Shabbos. He would come to 770. He would come to shul. He would daven, but he refused to put on a tallis. For a long time, refused to put on a tallis. Why? Who am I to put on a tallis? It doesn't make sense. So they were makar of him, everybody. I think they knew him from Russia. I don't know exactly. Anyway, this guy was a emeser pnimi. If he wasn't there, he wouldn't do it. On the positive side, when the Rebbe taught the Nign, Stav Yapitu, nobody knew the words, because they're not mamish Russian, they're Ukrainian. So by the Farbrengen, the Rebbe kept asking, anybody speak Ukrainian? A number of times he asked. This guy, what's his name? This guy was good shikeh. He got up on a table, and the Rebbe is asking who speaks Ukrainian. He gets up, he doesn't know what's going on. He gets up on the table, he says, L'chaim Rebbe, ihr sind mein Rebbe. The place, the emes and the truth of it was so powerful. And the Rebbe says, but do you speak Ukrainian? Anyway, mitzad, the demand for pnimis, you sometimes don't do. Mitzad, the demand for etzem, there's no not doing. Yeah? So the Deir HaShvi, what's two things? What is chassidus in the Deir HaShvi, and what kind of chassid does that create? So the first thing that makes the Shvi different is that the Shvi is only one generation. In one generation, the Shvi accomplishes what took 3 generations for Pnimis and 3 generations for Mesiras Nefesh. So remember there was a Farbrengen. Reb Mendel had just come out of Russia. He was standing over there, where he stood. And the Rebbe says that the answer to the kasha that he had asked has to be very simple and very obvious. Weil ebes montzach aveda, it is nicht für unser Dor. If it takes any effort, then it's not for us. I look at Reb Mendel. How is he handling this? A little while later, the Rebbe said, in that same Farbrengen, the Rebbe said, the inyan for Mesiras Nefesh is not for Jews. I look at it, Mendel. The Rebbe just wiped him out altogether. His whole life, Avodah, Mesiras Nefesh, gone. So what is the Deir HaShvi? Reb Nissen was in 770, and he was Farbrengen. Middle of Farbrengen, Reb Avram Mayor suddenly started screaming at him. He said, "Du Bal Geive, was kommst du her mit deine Teures, mit deine Skafja, mit der Skafja? Sag, was der Rebbe sagt." He said, "All these young guys, they're afraid of you. I'm not afraid of you. So Bal Geive. Sag, was der Rebbe sagt, nicht deine Teures." The difference between Shabbos and Chol is that in Chol, the improvement to the world, to the nivra, is a mitzvah. Anything you can do to improve the world, to improve the created being, that's the avodah. That's what Chol is for, to elevate the world. What is Shabbos? Shabbos is Kol Melachtecha Asuya. That's done. Don't do anything to improve the Nivra. Shabbos Hayom Lashem. Shabbos is completely about the Eibishter, not elevating or refining the Nivra. In fact, that's why Chol is called Chol. Not the people. The people are not Chol. The Avodah is elevating the Chol. So when the Rebbe said the Shvi is like Shabbos, Lagabe Chol, he's talking about the Avodah. The Alter Rebbe's Avodah was elevating the Chol. Elevating the human being. Everybody is nispol from makifim. The Sanishkan Chachma. Elevate the human being a little higher. The hispilus and the motivation comes from within. That's an improvement in the human condition. And even giving the etzem more prominence than the Giluyim is also a different kind of human being. A Baal Mesiras Nefesh. Not die for... The way you do a mitzvah is Mesiras Nefesh. Before 1414 President became the dormitory, there was an apartment building, and we lived on the third floor. One year, Osher Sasonkin moved in next door. We were 3D, he was 3C. I came home one day, Osher Nebuch is standing by his door, and he's tapping on the door. And somebody inside, a woman, is saying, "Where is?" She said, "Where is that?" He must have stood there for a half hour. It wasn't his wife. She didn't know that he is not going to answer that question. He wouldn't say ich. He just kept tapping on the door until, I don't know if his wife showed up or something. Achmanus got. There was no ich. That's the pshat HaMesiras Nefesh mensch. Not just that he had Mesiras Nefesh, that he was in jail, and without the jail, just the way he approached the Eibishter life was Mesiras Nefesh. So what's a mitzvah during the weekday becomes forbidden on Shabbos. That's a very dramatic statement. So the Rebbe says, you have to go on shlichus. And in the early years, it wasn't so easy to convince people. Who had the hardest time with the idea of going on shlichus? The most pnimis dikya. I'm going to go tell somebody else what to do. What about me? So I remember the early Farbrengens, when the whole olam could fit in upstairs in the small zal. And the Rebbe is saying, Daf einnemen de Welt mit Torah mit mitzvahs, einnemen de Welt. And you look around, who's sitting there? Very few people under 70. They don't speak English. They don't understand what the Rebbe is saying. Welche Welt? Was Welt? Einnemen de Welt. You know that famous story? Shmuel Schneider and Spritzer, I think it was?
Yeah.
Huh?
From Torah.
They were learning of some, they're learning a maimah where it says that 2/3 of the world is water. 2/3 of the globe is water. And one of them said, also, hey, ich bin gefahren auf dem Bahn von Moskau zu das, ach, ich nicht genau, sehr viel Wasser. So the other one says, das darf man glauben. That's a leap of faith. Just believe it. Believe it. Don't. So, einnemen de Welt. They had no idea what that even meant. And I could almost guarantee the Rebbe was saying with auf einnemen de Welt, and Chassidim were sitting, and I can tell you exactly who, they were sitting there thinking, yeah, aber the Chatas Neurim. Darf haben wir Sachen sein, mit der Tshuvaton, der Chatas Neurim. The Rebbe said, darf einnemen de Welt. So imagine the Rebbe calls in a young couple and says, darf fahren auf Shluchus. The guy says, yeah, but the Chatas Neurim. What would the Rebbe say? Nechten it is given a mitzvah to worry about the Chatas Neurim and to be misaken and to... Aber heint is Shabbos. All of a sudden, what was a mitzvah has become... Well, I'm telling you this. A young shliach, very successful, tells me not long ago, he's quitting. I can't. He can't stand being such a hypocrite. He's telling everybody else, try harder. The hypocrisy is making him crazy. When the Rebbe sent him on shlichus, the Rebbe didn't know he's a hypocrite. So imagine if he would have said to the Rebbe, I can't gain auf shlichus. I have to work on myself first. What would the Rebbe say? We know what the Rebbe would say. The Eibishter wart, asol werden adire betachtenim. And you're worried about yourself? It's ki'ilu. If I don't do tshuva for my averes, I'm going to go to Gehenna. For that, you're not going to go on shlichus? And besides, I said to him, if you stop being a shliach, you won't be a hypocrite. That's it. That'll fix it. You'll be a hypocrite without a job. What are you accomplishing? What? What was the Rebbe's message? So you see in the Maimon, we see in Meshakela. What does the Rebbe say? And the Rebbe is crying about it. It's nicht absade poshet. The Rebbe is crying. Where is there time for Ava? Where is there time for Yira? Where is there time for Tainuk? Every minute there's a kavanah. And that kavanah has to be fulfilled because the Eibishter vart af the dire betachteinen. So if to make a dire betachteinen, you have to go on shlichus, how can you bring up your individual petty little problem compared to the kavanah of the Eibishter's dire? In andere Werte, this is not about the nivra anymore. You still have more to fix in yourself? Yeah, it's like Shabbos. Friday you were busy fixing. You didn't fix everything you needed to fix, but it became shkia. So you say, no, it's a mitzvah to fix it. No, so let me fix it. No, now it's an aveda to fix it. Because you're thinking about yourself.
What a relief. Am I saying what I was thinking?
Now you can sleep tonight.
The relief is farfallen. Not okay, I'm okay. No. Too late. Too late. You missed the. So look at this. What kind of chassid does this produce? Mendel came to Farbrengen in 770, and he sat down next to Rebbe. I think this is the first year that he was spending Tishrei. He says to Rebbe, Zog l'chaim. Rebbe said, not in the mood. And Mendel said to him, yeah, Zog l'chaim. He said, not in the mood. Mendel was shocked. Was mit dir was? Nem, Zog l'chaim. Rebbe said, was, hab's a minig Zogen l'chaim? Hab's a minig? And we were all bacher, and we were like,
Enjoying the show.
what's with Rebbe? What? He did not say l'chaim. We figured out, understood later, Rebbe was trying to tell him, das ist nicht der hashishi. Adjust. Catch up. Yeah, in der hashishi. This was before the Rebbe stopped the drinking. He just wanted to say, if the l'chaim will help, you take. If not, what's some minig zogen l'chaim? So how come the Rebbe stopped the drinking? You can say, because it was producing some very negative things were coming out. But haguf kasha. I remember when Bachrim would get really, really shikir, the most beautiful, the most awesome things came out of their mouth. Not so much today. Some not so nice things come out. But haguf shayla. What changed? How come? The Rebbe davened publicly for 50 years. Not like the previous generations. In fact, the first year when the Rebbe davened for the Amud, the Elter Chassidim asked him to slow down. The person couldn't daven that fast. The Rebbe davened, let's say, in 18 minutes, shachris. They asked the Rebbe to slow down. He slowed down to 20 minutes. But it was so public. What was the Rebbe telling us? And you can touch in those few minutes. The Rebbe did everything that the previous Rebbeim did in 3 hours. Okay, fine. Lepoil. Something drastically changed. Of course, not in the ikir, but the style has not changed. How do you even think such a thing? So the Rebbe is telling us there is a change. America is nicht anders means it's no less, but it's much more.
Did this start with Prediger as well? Are you studying Shluchim?
Yeah, that was like the memutza, the alta l'tshuva, alta l'gula. Yeah? So it's already geula, yeah? It's already talking Mashiach, but conditional on the tshuva. Yeah, yeah. And by the way, this is the problem with being the last generation of Golus and the first generation of Geula. It's a terrible place to be. So half of you is Golus, half of you is Geula. How much? Where? When? So somebody asks the Rebbe, I'm thinking of building a house. The Rebbe says, now? At kommt Mashiach, don't bother. And then the other person, the Rebbe writes in and says, how come you're not building? He says, at kommt Mashiach. So the Rebbe says, so you'll take the building with you to Mashiach. So when the Rebbe told us we are the last generation of Golus and the first generation of Gula, that was a warning, not a compliment. So you better get ready, because this is going to be a very difficult. So what kind of chasidim did this create? If you're talking about the Eibishter, if the Eibishter is the focus, there are no limits. Even etzem, compared to Geluyim, etzem has certain conditions. Etzem is built in this gala, built in this shtana, built in this chalik. Etzem is governed by certain, but you can't say this about the Eibishter. So somebody wrote up an article about Chassidus for one of the kontresim for the, and he made a list, madreges. He started off with whatever, memala kol almim, seviv kol almim, kula kamei kol choshev, and Eibishter. So Rebbe looked at it and said, Eibishter is nicht a madrege. Why are you putting him on a list of the Eibishter is the Eibishter, not a madrege higher than. So what's if you focus on the Eibishter? If you focus on the Eibishter, there's no limits, because he's everything. So when the Rebbe said go on shlichus, people asked, and was it the tight shlichus? The Rebbe said, whatever. So when I go on shlichus, what should I do? No answer. Well, like Rabbi Chadakov would say, somebody came in and said, I'm ready to go on shlichus, but ich kann gar nicht. I'm not good at anything. Rabbi Chadakov, typical Chadakovism, would say, if you can't do anything, then you'll do everything. And du kennst gar nicht, kennst du doch alles. Okay, but it's true. The early Shluchim went out on shlichus, and they had no idea what they were doing. Remember one of the very early Shluchim conference, Kinnos HaShluchim. There were 12. This is the Kinnos Eilami. Most of the people couldn't come in. It was way too expensive. It took too long from outside. But Shimon Lazarov got up. He was the speaker. His speech was, "Was tut Berl Shem Tov in Detroit?" He was hilarious, but it was so true.
This is after you left.
No. No. That'll, first shliach in America. Was tut Bertel Shem? Does. No. Does. No. Was tut that in Detroit? He was trying to bring out the point that shlichus has no defined, limited application. And now we see. A shliach has to inspire mitzvahs. Or be a first responder if there's a flood. So which is it? Yeah. That's shlichus. Now, shlichus means go out on shlichus, gather some people, and teach them what you learned. Samach Vov? What did I learn? Samach Vov. If you're very sophisticated, I am base. And you're going to teach this? So what does it mean? There are no limits. There's no limits to who can go on shlichus. There's no limits to what you do on shlichus. There's no limit to how long you stay on shlichus. And the same thing with mitzvahim. Who can do mitzvahim? The Rebbe tells this guy, when you get back to campus, remind your friends to put on tefillin. He says, Rebbe, I don't put on tefillin. So, there's no limits. So, mitzvahim, a 10-year-old is going around putting on tefillin and with whom? With a guy in a Santa Claus outfit. At least take it off. Nah, roll up your sleeve. There's no limits. A lacuse everywhere, under all circumstances. So one of the big differences between Shabbos and Chayil, in Chayil, it's sur meira, then asay tov. Like beirer, you take out the bones and then you can eat. Shabbos, this rule that it first has to be sur meira and then asay tov is now a negative. If you take out the bones first, you're mechal Shabbos. So today the rule is asay tov. And what's going to be with the ra? If you're busy with asay tov, the ra will disappear. The Shabbos dika aveda is the klipa that remains today is simply heder ha'ir. So there are two kinds of darkness. There's darkness that is mamish dark, and then there's the darkness that is an absence of light. If the darkness is an absence of light, and you fight it, you make it worse. All this fighting and remembering the Holocaust and the Holocaust, it's making it worse. If the darkness is heder ha'ir, then obviously what's the solution? Bring in the oir. So there were times in the 6 generations where you had to fight. The Friedrich Rebbe fought communism. He didn't say increase oir. He said resist them and fight them until they kill you. That was Deir Hashishi. The Cheshach was a different Cheshach. But how would we know this? Only the Rebbe could tell us. Now the solution is more oir. Why? Because the klipa today is the heder ha'oir. So there was one time, I think only once, the Rebbe said, Avedas habirurim hat sich geendigt. That was a long time ago. you see the world a lot better now than it was? There's no need for birurim?
I never developed in that fight.
In which way?
Pada b'sholim nafshi, whatever the... I never developed mit Torah, not with... So what? Of course the world still needs birur. Look what's going on. But the shabbos dike birur, eichel from the pseilus, not the pseilus from the eichel. So in every situation, find the eichel and strengthen it. There's a pseilus. The pseilus is there only because you're not paying enough attention to the eichel. So this is why I think Yedias Hashem has become a bit of a crisis. If this is Shabbos, and Shabbos Hayem L'Hashem, and it's not about my becoming better, my becoming nicer, my becoming holier, it's about the Eibishter. How can you do this without Yedias Hashem? So the answer, less machshava tvisa bei, it's not an answer anymore. I have to say, the Rebbe Farbrengen infinitely more than all the Rebbeim put together. And all of that was to tell you that less machshava tvisa bei. If you look at the Rebbe's Maimorim, you see one theme. And the theme is das negeya in atzmos. The Rebbe takes a Maimon from the Frierdiker Rebbe, from the Tzemach Tzedek, from the Alter Rebbe, that says that this inyan reaches into Seviv Kol Almin, and the Rebbe says, V'yesh leimar, that it goes even higher into atzmos. Every Maimer. In other words, the Rebbe took everything and made it Eibishter. This is Shabbosdik. Yeah? Like even Tanya. Today, if you ask, what is Tanya all about? Oh, it's Sefer Shel Beinani. Tells you to be a Beinani. Tells you how to be a Beinani. It helps you be a Beinani. Then people come along and they say, you know any Beinani? You know even one Beinani from Tanya? That Mendel said that he knew 6. We're not doing too well, statistically. Look what the Rebbe does. The Rebbe tells the children to memorize 12 psukim, and he chooses pisgomim from Tanya. So what would you imagine, what would you assume that the Rebbe is going to pick out of Tanya that every kid should memorize? The first thing that comes to mind is, Hanefesh Hashem is b'Yisrael, l'chelik elakami ma'al mameh. No? The second thing would be v'habeinani imidas kol odom v'achareha kol odom yim. Yeah, that's me, the beinani. Now, what does he pick? End of Tanya. V'zeh kol odom v'tachlus b'riyosei dira b'tachteinen. What happened to the beinani? Beinani is a hachona. The ikir is there has to be a dira b'tachteinen. And what is the simcha? The simcha is that the Eibush that is sameach b'dirosei zu b'tachtei. What happened to the beinani? Yeah. Ki kori v'lecha. Go try be a beinani.
No, but that's one of the 12 psukim.
Yeah. So what the Rebbe is saying, if you Even if you're not a Beinani, Korei velecha hadava beficha ubelvavcha la'aseisei. So the Rebbe took everything and brought it to its Shabbosdike conclusion. So to the Rebbe, what does the Alter Rebbe say in Tanya? Did it b'tachtena. What about the rest? Sahachana. So in many instances where somebody asked the Rebbe Psashayla b'negei tzaveda, and the Rebbe would say, "Das ist nicht verheint." Not because we went down. Everybody says, "Sure, we can't daven barichas." We went down. We didn't go down. We went up so high that it's like Shabbos l'gabachel. So what about davening barichas? I think Label Shapiro brought a Misnagde Shabacher to 770 for Farbrengen. Chassidische Farbrengen. And who was Farbrengen? I think I don't know, somebody was Farbrengen. And he was saying, the Mashpia was saying, was der Tachlis von dem ganzen Lernen am davent nicht. He kept saying it over and over. This Bacher went back to his yeshiva, and they said, "No, so what did you hear?" He said, "They don't daven." I said, "What?" He said, "They don't." Alleen gehet. The Mashpia said that they don't daven. They learn, but they don't daven. So you got to understand the language, So what about the davening ba'aveda? What was the davening ba'aveda? You want to increase your avos Yisrael. What were people doing under the talis for 8 hours? Huh? Beats me. You want to increase your avos Yisrael. The Rebbe says, Avadi, you have to increase your avos Yisrael. I'm giving you a one-way ticket to avos Yisrael, and don't come back. We will see what your avos Yisrael is, and it will grow, and it will be for sure under the talis. You're sitting under the talis because you want to convince yourself that Olam Hazeh is not important, Gashmis is not important. The ikid is, I got a better solution. Here's a one-way ticket, and I'm not paying you. So what am I going to eat? You'll eat or you won't eat. Gay. That is a lot more real than sitting under the talis and thinking, gosh, music on this geld is blotted. In other words, that'll happen b'derech memela. While you are creating a dira b'tachtenim, of course your avos Yisrael will increase, and your hang-up on Gashmias will improve. One way or the other. So the shaila is only when the Rebbe said, Ich gib es über euch. That was a huge compliment. A huge compliment. The Rebbe felt that he could rely on us. How is that even possible? When everybody said that without the Rebbe, it's all going to fall apart. The Geste Chachamim from Dor all predicted with absolute confidence, it's over. Kenished. It's not going to happen. It'll disappear overnight. It'll collapse. Why did they think that? First of all, because they thought that Chassidus is makifim. In a makif, if you're nispol from somebody else's heiligkeit, when he goes away, there's nothing to be nispol from. They also thought that the whole movement was Giluyim. This is a great organization, they're very structured, they're whatever, they're non-judgmental, blah, 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 blah. But without the leader, it's going to fall apart. When the Rebbe said, to paraphrase, Ich ken sich verlassen auf euch, that was an amazing, that meant that what the Rebbe taught us and what the Rebbe implanted in us is real. And if it's real, why would it fall apart? How could it even fall apart?